Hello everybody, thanks for watching the video. It's great to participate in IEA World Congress. Today, I'm going to talk about my paper, The Human Side of Cyber Property Rights Theory and Evidence from Github. I'm Pengfei Zhang, a PhD candidate in economics from Cornell. I will be on the job market this fall. Secure property rights is critical to economic development. It is often proposed as a solution to the tragedy of the commons. The idea is that the law enforces the right to exclude, which prevents congested use and provides incentives for productive activities. In this paper, however, we're going to present a case where property rights may lead to the failure of the commons. It may be the source of the tragedy of the commons. And this particular case is in cyberspace. Cyberspace had a remarkable commons. Many digital contents are often characterized by what we call open access. The authors make the creative work freely available online for everybody to use. Examples of this sort can be found all across the field. We have open source softwares, open knowledge provision, open access scientific collections, so on and so forth. In economic terms, these are large public goods provided by a large group of people. Property distribution of the digital content, however, is subject to legal constraint, namely property rights. And property rights in cyberspace takes a major form of copyright. Copyright, like all other property rights, is a bundle of rights, including the exclusive right to make copies and distribute them, and also the exclusive right for further derivative works. Into the millennium, we saw this global trend on enforcing authorized use. One of the most notable benchmark is World Intellectual Property Organization Copyright Treaty. This paper gonna focus on the US implementation of that treaty, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. Under the DMCA, the copyright owner can send a takedown notice to any content provider. That is a request to take down the content that he thinks is infringing on his copyright. So ideally, what DMCA is doing, hopefully, is that the copyright owners can use it to seek justice. But strange things happened. The copyright owners seem to exploit their powers to block competition from the commons. I document in the paper some of the high-profile cases where these are large special interest group and large corporations like Recording Industry Association of America and AT&T, these large groups that sue individuals for simply making an improvement of what they claim to be entitled to be their property. So the consequence of this massive threat of liability tied to the murkier boundaries of copyright law is that the creators who want to innovate in this space have to sign off from the dominant player of the lost generation. In this paper, we build a theoretical model on this phenomenon of content takedown based on important institutional details. That is, of course, open access can be used for reproduction, but can also be used for original contribution. But what this litigation strategy that is copyright owners are employing, are they really seeking justice in the sense that they complement the imperfect technological enforcement, or are they actually seeking rent, such that they want to eliminate competition from the open access providers? And we try to support our theory with the data from GitHub. In short, our theoretical arguments are twofold. One, if social preference is present, then multiple equilibria arise. There is a reproduction equilibrium but there's also an original contribution equilibrium. And two, given that there are multiple equilibria, then copyright law has a special role of equilibrium selection. Stronger copyright law may have a perpetual adverse effect, such that it may erode open access activities completely, while imposing some limitations of copyright may have some nice effect that can make the original contribution equilibrium unique. So in what follows, I'm gonna give you a taste of what I have in the paper, hopefully to get you interested to look at my working draft. Let's start from the empirical evidence. I studied developers' open source behavior in GitHub. As you may already know, GitHub is an online platform hosting open source code and repositories. So it is one of the major open access platforms on the internet. By 2015, it's already the largest host of source code in the world. In GitHub, the developer can initiate and track the development of the repository, which is a folder online, to which contributors, it can be anyone like you and me, can make commits to the repository that improve its content. It has integrated the social features so that users can watch projects and follow users, just like what you did on Facebook and YouTube. So social preference is salient here. The treatment variable we're gonna look at is this DMCA takedown notice as a threat of litigation. As I mentioned before, the takedown notice is a request from copyright owners to the individual users on GitHub to remove disputed contents. And it usually goes like either you want to take down your content now, or if you fail to comply, I will take you to the court. I employ an event study design where the identification assumption is that the timing of a notice is as good as random assignment, such that early users can be a counterfactual for late users. And we're going to test for the hypothesis and show you in this paper, showing in this presentation that the DMCA takedown notice actually have a negative effect that chills the open source contributions. But just one step before that, so I self-collected the complaints from 2011 to 2015. There's a total of 1,091 match complaints matched to a total of 1,712 users. So here's the result. On the vertical axis are the quarters before and after DMCA takedown notice. On the vertical axis are the number of contributions to the repositories shared by these receiving users. There are three things to note. First, the pre-notice level is relatively flat, validating the parallel train assumption. Second, there's an immediate drop after someone receives a notice, suggesting that there's a negative effect on the open source contribution. And third, that negative effect seems to be persistent. So compared to the reference pre-notice level, the number of commits decreased by on average 10% in the following 10 quarters. And next, I'm gonna show you a theory that explains this drop can happen actually as an equilibrium change. So I have a game theoretical model. Like any games, I should tell you three things: the players, their strategy, and their payoffs. So let's start from the players. There are three kinds of players. We have the institutional copyright owners. These are the RIAA and the AT&T. They develop proprietary projects whose content is distributed only for profit. And the amount of content for the owner is always with a hat. So the amount of content for the proprietary projects is X hat with a linear cost CX. And we also have a freelance creator who initiates an open access project freely available to any online users. So anyone can use without a fee. And its content is denoted by X star, and that's depending on the user's contribution. I'm gonna explain shortly. We also have a continuum of users where every single user can consume at most one project. The open access projects relies on user-generated content, and the output of such a project will be the sum of the reproduction and the original contributions. So there are two ways to contribute. One is for the users to contribute original content at a cost that is the same as the copyright owner. But two, the users can also reproduce. And that's the first key assumption in the model. So the user gonna reproduce at a lower cost, but only the maximum amount of the individual reproduction is counted in the open access project. So we have the production process I already tell you, and the takedown notice is modeled as a litigation process where the two parties can settle or they may go to court. And that result gonna determine the market structure of whether there's a competition or there's actually a monopoly of the copyright owner. So if they go to court, and that's important, that's where the copyright law kicks in. And this denoted by this P. There's a probability P that the owners will prevail. There's probability 1 minus P that the creators gonna prevail. And here comes our second key assumption, which is even though the copyright owner only cares about profit, but every individual has their social preference on others' chosen projects. I have the list of evidence to support this preference in the paper, but in short, you can have two interpretations. One, this is pure altruism, and two, this can be positive network externality. So copyright owner, so the copyright law is modeled as a pair PQ, where again P is the probability that the owner wins an injunction against the open access project, and Q is the difficulty of copying. So first thing is that social preference leads to multiple equilibria. You can see in this graph, from left to the right, the number of proprietary users grows, and from right to the left, the number of open access users grows. If you are familiar with the two-sector models, and this is something very similar. So even though the N star, which is the number of open access users, can be anything from 0 to N, but we show that in equilibrium, it can only be either 0 or N. So the reason is that open access participation is self-fulfilling. If the open access project has a higher output, then of course all the users gonna pour into the open access project, and there's no meaningful price that can be charged by the owner. If on the other hand, the proprietary project has a higher output, then he can charge a price that is absolutely lower than the difference in the user value of the two projects. And as a result, all of the users will move away from open access and use the honors for profit projects. So if there's a competition, now we know that there can be two equilibria, but the copyright law determines the set of equilibrium. So in this final graph of the result, I'm gonna show you, remember, contribution is not only social, but also risky because of litigation threat. And in this graph, I map different sets of equilibria to the copyright law regime. where the highlighted area is an area of multiple equilibrium. So the first arrow shows you that if we give a very strong property rights exclusively to the owner, such that we increase P unilaterally, then the only equilibrium will be that there's no contribution because it's so risky to contribute. And on the other hand, there's a second arrow. That is, if we impose some reasonable limitations on the exclusive right, then we can actually make the original contribution equilibrium unique. So to conclude, this paper presents a case in cyberspace where property rights may lead to the failure of the commons. And that echoes some of the key observations of the key scholars and practitioners in the field. Our findings caution against this global effort on enforcing authorized use. So we should really start to think about balancing in this kind of content takedown problems, and limitations on exclusive rights such as fair use doctrine can be very useful and has an equilibrium selection role. In the end, I think this research leads to a bigger agenda of this crowding out the social motivation to create and share. Thank you very much for your listening. Hope you'll be interested in the paper.